Chili here with Sirius Dallas Moon. This is Soul Hour and Mercury Day. 444 as I speak. Mercury rules the ascendant as 21 degree Gemini, and midheaven is ruled by Jupiter, which is in the second house. Jupiter is 23 degrees Cancer, midheaven 3 degrees Pisces. Mercury conjoins Black Moon Lilith opposing Uranus, and Sun is 18 degrees Sag. I take a moment to reflect now that Neptune is direct. Before Neptune ingresses into Aries, I take a moment to reflect on my journey with Uranus in Aries and Taurus. So with Uranus in Aries is basically when I did I completely renovated my view upon fitness routines. So it went from standard gym and some swimming to preparation for calisthenics, what was freeletics back then, and learning about actual nutrition. So I made a lot of experiments with nutrition, and I tried to be what was it, the raw veganism, the amount the amount of I would just go and try to be raw vegan, and then just the amount of baked pastries from burekas to whatever. It was so funny. And my fridge was filled. But I really like the beautiful colors of all the fruits and the veggies. I think it was already the second degree when I made that transition. But that was, at first it was the trickery of using coffee because I didn't have money for food. And then I tried to buy actual food. Then I tried to buy fruits and vegetables. And then it ended up, I don't even remember how. But then I returned, I think, to eat meat. Because even my parsley shakes weren't giving me enough iron. And I'm like, the moment of the broken, the moment of breakage, okay, the depression of the raw veganism. It was when I made a shake of, I think it was 2 heads of parsley, and none of that dumb fuckery was raising my iron levels. So now, with Uranus in Taurus, I learned about soil. I learned to dig half moons. I learned about the little weeds that are out there. I made salves from stuff I picked up in the garden. And I learned about the history of why the soil wasn't nourishing enough. Um, I have a shout out. Shout out to Chloe from Blooms and Greens. She made a short about what type of weeds are growing in the soil, because that tells us if the soil is needing nutrients. Now, I really hope she's going to develop that into a course or something, because that is excellent information. Everything is sold out. I don't all the store is sold out. So, just a shout out to the channel. And then I learned to pick the invasive herbs to make a salad. And when I ate my big bowl of amaranth, it's that prickly amaranth, before it gets prickly, with some olive oil and the thieves vinegar that I made with store-bought apple cider vinegar that still has the little fungi in it. I was watching a shit ton of Amish videos, I tell you that. And and as I was eating my greens, which is very necessary right now because it's winter and I'm gonna be craving chocolates if I don't have my greens. And it's not even just that the food is pricey, it's also that the food is not gonna have the nutrients. So all these Uranus teachings about eating the garden weeds, and that's really, really, really benefic. So I was just thinking about how I went from trying different diets, not getting enough nutrients, and then having my diets failed because I didn't have soil, okay? Because I didn't have access to my own soil. And by the way, whether it's the Me Too or the human trafficking campaigns, ladies that got out of human trafficking, almost each and every one of them grew a garden and began to create things, because that heals. Even when I looked sexual sovereignty, because I looked at housing, and the only thing that they have there is, unless you're ace, which by the way I am, is going to be surprising to people. If you know the witch, shout out to the witch from Wanderlust. She's also asexual. Um, she's like, she would have sex magic, but she's asexual with others, and kind of the same. Yeah, people are really, really shocked when they hear that. Um, but there's no housing options for ace people. And what it showed up with sexual sovereignty and housing was for women that are sex workers. And this is another shout out to Seizure Girl, that talks about even the most, what people think is the most tender, that's the GFE, and how traumatic it was for her. Even when a person didn't have, like, I don't know, sadistic or. And also, she talks about the trafficking, that it's the basically rape, and that's what people call sex work. Now, most of the people that recovered, they begin to grow a garden or to grow, and even when I looked at the connection of decolonizing sexuality and so on, indigenous people talked about the connection to the land. What do you do when you lineage to Holocaust survivors? I don't know, but we do need connection to the land to manage our nervous system. And the way it went from Uranus Aries to Uranus Taurus, and to the notion of those, and I learned about the fact that many invasive plants like chufa became something that was said to be genocided with the people and the land, because it could sustain people without government. Now, by the way, sexual boundary violation harms the absorption of food and nutrients. So it's both the soil not nourishing and people not really getting the nutrients from the food. And then, of course, with the quality of the water and so on, can cause caries, yeast overgrowth, cancer. What's another? Lupus. So human trafficking is very not ecosystemic. And where there's no housing opportunity for ACE people, what does it mean? It means all the houses are human trafficking hubs. It basically means a person can't have a house, food, access to soil if they're not raped, and then if they're raped, their nutrients don't absorb, and even the soil is becoming polluted, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, it's the ritual abuse that I talk about that causes that. But it's an interesting journey from figuring out what the fitness and the diet and the fitness began to go from, the gym to freeletics and calisthenics. Basically, it's body weight fitness. And you think about how Aries is sovereignty, and freeletics and calisthenics is very much about the body weight, which is less injury, and it's also about the self. It's like my body weight is way more important. Then, of course, I dealt with being, with targeting and all the other things. I did a thesis proposal and went into the politics of the senses in ESP, the use of trauma for ESP, basically, the body-mind question in the medicines, and then I studied aromatherapy because they targeted me when I tried to go to therapy after saying no to the human trafficking in academia. And I said, well, if I was recovering from basically violation for 3 months, then, well, at least study some practical thing that I can later do for a living. And then people think that aromatherapy is massages. Couldn't be farther from the truth. You don't want my hands on you. That's what I'm saying. And the people that don't honor sovereignty, they don't you know, make sure people have access to soil and all of these things independently of, trafficking and stuff like that. The people, that if they don't abolish trafficking and ritual abuse, then of course, if they don't honor touch, then of course, that's life. But here is the thing, that it went from that and the fitness that was self-sustainable. And most of my thesis proposal, it was self-studies, because I was studying the politics department, and then I studied the body-mind question. Hey, my instructor was an MD, so and other people are like, who is? I don't think they're gonna support this thesis in this department. Like, my instructor is an MD. Started with an argument, and everything's fine except that there was human trafficking in the academia, and I said no, no, nope. And they used dark occult. So I said, well, at least astrologers and astrological magicians, they know what it is. How can I defend my thesis in academia where everybody rapes some people in the astral and then talk about pseudoscience where we talk about the body-mind question? And do you think that does not affect the type of treatment methods in the medicine, both holistic and conventional? Of course, conventional, one could say dogmatic materialism, although in physics that's no longer true in physics department, but they look into the spirit and matter of the atom, and but also in holistic medicine. They can't tell you, if they tell you the truth, then, then who vouched for them to have a business, and what protection they paid in the form of turning the blind eye when a child's being raped and buried alive on the soil? Now, from that self-sustainable, it went to Taurus. And Uranus in Taurus, it comes to liberate. Both liberate from the dependency on the land, for people can grow um, crops also without having their own soil. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's kind of like people growing in enclosed spaces. Basically, they still need the nutrients of the soil. The growing with water is not as packed with nutrients. Like, it's better than no food, but it's not as packed with nutrients. And the fact that a lot of the, I'm not saying raw vegan, but a lot of the failed attempts for me with diet during Uranus in Aries was because of lack of access to soil, and because the soil was not healthy. And then I learned to dig up the half moons, which is a method to revive the soil, make it hold water, and regrow the native crops and plants and weeds. And the weeds, those invasive, okay? Shout out to Cameron. I haven't spoken with Cameron, I think, in 2 years or something. He was mentioning, is a native Uranus ascendant, and he was mentioning how eating invasive plants is important for humans because we are like an invasive plant. Now, an invasive plant is a plant that grows, think about chickpeas. It's a plant that grows even through the snow. Now, when we talk about holistic medicine or the holistic perspective of food, of course, to eat invasive plants is very important. Think about rosemary. One good invasive plant is rosemary. Rosemary, okay, we like it with the potatoes. Is something we put to the thieves' vinegar. Cleanses the liver. And liver in Chinese medicine is called the commander of the army. Hail, fel rosemary. But not to overdose. Okay. Another invasive plant is wormwood. People know the other species of wormwood, which is mugwort, is psychic protector like rosemary, but it's also good for the endocrine system. Now, again, I'm not a naturopath, it's just knowledge from experience here, okay? Now, and here's the thing. When we eat our invasive plants, then we can go to the local market and we can buy the actual tomatoes from the people that grow them themselves with the rich, nutrient-packed soil and a bouquet of flowers that we can also afford to buy at the local market. Nobody is growing all the vegetables and in fact most of the people that tried full homestead, unless they're like really, die-hard Amish, most of them later gave up on that. Okay, because people need a community, or people need also a lifestyle, lifestyle we got used to, whether it's traveling and so on and so forth. But we also need the soil. And Uranus Taurus reminded us that we also need the soil. And the way that invasive plants were treated is the way people were treated. Okay, they killed them with toxic chemicals under the guise of medicine, treated them as menace. And what's the next sign up is Gemini. Gemini sociology. Civil War clock. And look, just 3 signs, okay? Aries, ditching the weightlifting to freeletics and calisthenics. The I am. By the way, they did a shit ton of rituals that it's difficult to even exercise. But without sovereignty of the individual, nothing is sovereign. I'm not going to talk about the anomalies in the genitals and the way that the ritual abuse affects the sexuality of the people that were born there and so on and so forth. Okay, because all of that, okay, you can't change the form of the genitals, but unless people want to go for these type of surgeries. But energy transmutation, sovereignty, regaining one's own sense of self, all of that is possible. It doesn't work and never will work with slavery. It has to honor sovereignty. Okay, sovereignty is the I am. And then to Taurus, which is, oh, wait a second, our diet wasn't working even when we got organic food because we didn't have access to soil, so we couldn't have the actual crops. Okay, it's not just at the local market, it's at the particular person that grows the soil a particular way, but it's also to recover from sexual boundary or from sexual sovereignty violation. One has to reconnect with the land, with the soil, and heal the soil as well, and heal the self. The rest, okay? Now they do rituals so people won't be able to rest, so they won't be able to relax into the feminine. One cannot have freedom when they don't honor the sexual sovereignty. Very simple. Okay, if you date a woman and you try to force yourself up to her and so on and so forth, what will happen? One of two ways. You seem straight up a sex offender, or she denies that she was hurt because it's this, because it's that, and then she begins to stress and stifle and be obsessive. As the bipolar. Don't rape. Just the same as people are afraid about commitment and this and that. If a person is really embodied within sexuality, then okay, why we talk about withdrawn consent with Taurus? Because it's the sense of embodiment. This is where we tend to. Okay, what's coming up? And the issues that would bother commitment come up in where? Communication. That's the next sign, Gemini. Now I'm with a generation that has a Chiron in Gemini. And Uranus is going to go over my Chiron again. So now then we see that the next sign is basically the civil war between those that did the phylactics and the calisthenics and the connecting with the soil and the rewilding and the half moons, and now need to communicate their position and stand their ground to the people that try to take the sovereignty from people, take the soil from people, put everybody in digital prisons and then bomb them. Well, eventually having to provide for sexual sovereignty, because it's not that nobody wants to work anymore. It's because people understood with holistic medicine, and now Neptune is going to go into Aries. People will understand how patient sovereignty is important to healing when it comes to psychiatric issues. Or we're going to have psychiatrists with a lobotomy. The patient is going to do something to the brain of the psychiatrist. Aries rules the head. And of course, we're going to learn viscerally the body-mind connection. Okay, this is one-to-one my thesis because it's the body-mind connection, and actually I think the thesis proposal and was at the end of Uranus going through Andromeda constellation in Aries. Okay, from the middle decan conjoining Aries in Aries and then moving on to Andromeda. That's when I wrote my thesis proposal. I began to work on my thesis and the essays about the housing crisis in Sweden, and the politics of the census. That's the ESP one. And now Neptune is going to go throughout the several decades through where Uranus has been. Now, if I try to think about Uranus in Pisces, so Uranus ingressed into Aries around 2010, and that means that around 2003, Uranus ingressed into Pisces. I don't remember. For me, it was the attempts to go to academia, study filmmaking, volunteer on productions, um, yes, say no to corruption in a credit company. By the way, when Neptune ingressed into Pisces, I was prepared because I knew more about the subprime crisis than other people. I also did not have estate, and I did not have estates because I didn't agree to sell people credit that they won't be able to return. Yeah, basically did not support usury. That's what's up. I did not know to name it like that, okay? It was just like, why would people need credit? Why does a private client need to use credit for? And the product was the first card that is out of bank credit card. The juxtaposition, one of my first jobs was McDonald's when I was vegetarian. I was vegetarian because I didn't know there's such a thing as vegan. That I would try when Uranus would go to Aries. Now, to be very honest, the minute I got my gift for the holidays, I went to buy salmon and the IKEA meatballs because I needed to be Like, I needed food, okay? Byron is here. It is a storm. Yesterday there was a little bit rain here, but today it was supposed to be flus and stuff, and I had some green salad that I picked from invasive plants. So if I think about 2003 with Uranus, and then 2012 the ingress of Neptune to Pisces, then the ingress would be around the subprime. After the aftermath of the subprime, I would begin to study, and the same folks that didn't believe me when it was a problem with my feet had to fund my studies when I went into almost suicide because of that. No, not for nothing. There were no jobs. Jobs are completely, you see, if the job market was adaptable to people with disabilities, it would not be a problem, because I was like, well, there are many people that work even like on a wheelchair, but and with people even on wheelchairs, sometimes they need a wheelchair, sometimes they don't. You see, the human traffickers are having a hard time acknowledging disability. Then I did my first degree, and Uranus ingressed towards, and then Neptune is about to ingress into Aries now. So 2010, the ingress of Neptune to Aries was the aftermath of the subprime. And I remember I studied the topic of resource economy. Okay, the fact, because I said my money need to money. And actually I'm dealing with that a lot right now. I'm actually studying the history of financial crises and the banks and the currencies. And because I know about, the testimonies of ritual abuse survivors, then I can connect that with the occult and the trafficking and the extortion cult. You see, the financial coins, he would tell you about the Bank of Amsterdam, that it was a zero usury, okay? 100% reserves. Okay, 100% gold. If you put the money there, it was backed up with gold, 100% gold. And then they vouched for the Vogue, for Dutch East India, which was supposed to be like speculative loaning, but they did it with another book and so on and so forth. And they didn't let the people that invested in the bank know about that. Now, he can't tell you about the extortion cult, and without the extortion cults, you understand nothing, because how did they get to make that deal with Vogue? They were extorted, and they had to find a way to launder. Okay, they would rape 12 years olds and so on, and boys and so on. Then they would be extorted. But the girls would get pregnant, the boys, okay? It was... And then they had to, okay, they had to bring the money, and now with the money, they looted so they brought them gold, and they returned to them silver that they stole from Spain. And then they stopped, they were looting what they could, but then the British came and off was with the Bank of Amsterdam. But without extortion calls, you don't, and without the calls and mind control, then you don't understand even how come, like, parents wouldn't give their what if the birth is unregistered. But children, how does the child, yeah, but they torture the children, and then what they made the children, they completely mind control the children, so the children's job was to plant orgies. Okay, listen to Annika Lucas. It's a 9 millennia thing. It's not a 1 century thing. That people study finance and they don't know about extortion codes. It's like, where'd the money gone? All of y'all gonna ask that in Valentine's Day? No, it's a good thing that Neptune and Saturn meets on Valentine's Day because people are gonna ask where's the money gone. It's like, yeah, the wife. But here is the thing. The women went all the way to Ekveld to not get married. You You see, a wife is like Swiss bank. If you need your money to disappear, I can make your money disappear in seconds. But then you're gonna, same with Swiss bank, you're gonna come and ask, well, where's my money? You're gonna say, what money? But if your money is money laundered by human trafficking, that's not Swiss bank. Now here's the thing, most of these ladies, their husband, the money he brings home is laundered by human trafficking. Some of them are in it, some of them are not. If you ask, what's my 401k doing? Look up in the sky. You see the target in surveillance? In Israel, with the war in Iran, it was very simple. We actually had the case. It's not a laughing story, but hey, it's funny. A lady that was a financial advisor. I mean, she wasn't, but she was. And, and she called herself the solid investor, or the solid conservative, okay? And she said she sleeps well with investing in weapon companies. Now, before the war with Iran, I wrote a short skit about the child that invested in weapon trade and had a missile over his head. For her, it was almost like that. Her mother was sick, she was sitting with the baby, and then the missiles were knocking off buildings 2 meters from her. And she said she'd taken a break from being a financial advisor. I mean, blogger, Now, it's not funny, but it's funny, but it's funny. In astrology, we call it the 12th house and the 8th house. The 8th house is when we swipe under the rug and we put the money to rest. We call it passive income. There's no such thing as passive income. The 12th house is what we didn't see. What we didn't see comes what that money is actually doing. Oh, Byron is about to arrive south. at night. So something is going to water the land. Um, Mercury conjoining Black Moon Lilith opposing Uranus. I'm recording. To be honest, I don't know how to completely delineate the effect of this because Neptune just got direct. And somebody's barking in the Uranus rules cats. Wait, I'm recording. You say the IRS knows we don't have a mention. Now here's another thing. For me, Taurus is the third house and Aries is the second house. And third house is podcast. I have Mercury in Aries, so it's a very dream with action type of sign. Kind of like I have an idea, I act on it. And the good thing is I actually apply my ideas. When I turn into political assassination prevention. Now here's the thing. No, because without talking about extortion calls, it's Aries is an on-the-go type of sign. The mantra with Aries is if you're gonna wait for the time you're gonna be ready for your next enterprise or your next move, you're gonna be waiting forever. Okay? With Aries, you take action. Now, because of that, when it came to Taurus, to my podcast, I mastered the art of opening a chart and starting to talk. See, it's not refined. It's not, nice flashcards because there wasn't any time. Like, particularly, I did water expense upon cooling, turned into political assassination prevention, covered NATO, covered the laser focused, okay? The studies of how the astrology affects the type of weapon and even the delays in weapon production. That's not the kind of stuff that you can sit peacefully in a room and have, a nice. By the time you get to edit something, it could be a missile dropping on your head. And then, yes, it's coming. It's okay. Byron is coming. Hi to the engineers. They had a hurricane that they named Milton. I think that's the guy that said don't pay attention to the moods of the market because they don't pay attention to your moods. And Milton Friedman. I could be confusing stuff. I'm not a genius in which theorist said what there. Because it's all, it was all funded by the same oil company under the same extortion codes. This is how we had what's this nice lady who's singing what is rock star made in USSR, and she's singing in USA. They're saying, "Oh, I appreciate you, comrade. You still didn't get drunk and made a revolution in the entire country." What country? Red, orange. And the orange in between the red and the orange. So I can definitely say that Mercury, Lilith. Ah, okay. This is how we're preppers. But that it connects exactly to what I wanted to say, because I've mastered the skill of, hey, there's a little bit of an internet connection. Oh, fantastic! What's the chart? And deriving from that information. Mm-hmm. Now, in between charts, the brain already remembers what's here, what's there, what runs it here, what runs it there. Not a walking ephemeris, but fairly good. And those skills, when Uranus strikes Gemini, they're gonna be very effective. So when it came to one-to-one consultation and all these things, I did some consultations one-on-one. People actually loved it, but I'm not the type, with Uranus in my third house, I couldn't have an appointment here, there. Everything changes. Uh, but it became quite useful, because there were times, when 7th October struck, I used horary astrology to calculate if it is safe to go to the supermarket or not, which was 2 meters outside. I tried to do that for political assassination prevention. It ended up with so much targeting that um, so I can think about the trajectory. Okay, if you think about Uranus moving through Pisces, then Neptune moving through Pisces, and how Neptune is giving another chapter to what Uranus did, and that was around 2003 to 2010. And indeed, when Uranus was in Pisces, I learned about holistic medicine, which was by then in praxis. Okay, there's nothing healed me. Went to allergies and all these nice stabs in the hand. They made the big stabs. Okay, 50 times they stab, each time with different materia. None of that, nada. And there's kind of like, well, I'm working in a polluted city, and then went to a holistic practitioner, and the importance of expressing myself, creativity, speaking my truth, all of these things. So when I talk about holistic medicine, I'm talking because I saw it. I tried to have a safety job. I nearly lost my life. I tried to tend to political assassination prevention. I nearly lost my life. And now Neptune is going to ingress into Aries, so I think about 2010 since 2000 until around 2018. Actually, remember the very moment Uranus ingressed into Taurus in 2018. And now Neptune doing that. And here's my complaint. I talk about, when I talk about jobs and income and do something with my life and so on. First of all, I remember the fact, look at the silliness, because I'm an astrologer, and but look at the silliness. When I began to do things like growing the half moons and so on and so forth, I said there were transits to my 10th house. And it happened again this year. I'm like, why my 10th house? It's Sagittarius. The garden is the 3rd house. But Sagittarius is trees. It's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter rules trees. And Uranus is reforestation. Jupiter in Capricorn in the 11th. It rules traditions, but also agriculture. And Jupiter rules trees. Now that's a funny thing because I'm also a writer. And that's Jupiter, Sagittarius, and Gemini. Okay, paper is usually made from cut trees that are processed, and just to think about these juxtapositions, and actually I have Rahu in Gemini and Ketu in Sagittarius. But the midheaven in Sagittarius on a galactic center, which is why I tend to dig in half moons. That led to the half moon, because somebody joked about me digging half moons. It was like half moon, it was the first ship of Vogue of Dutch East India. It's like, oh, that is interesting. We need to do the chart of Dutch East India. Yeah, that's the cloning factory. It's colonialism. Oh, interesting. Neptune is about to ingress to Aries. That's colonialism o'clock. And Uranus in Gemini, which is about the space within the city. Okay, Saturn in Gemini will try to limit the space within the city. Now, Gemini usually rules things that are of two. Think about people losing their RVs in USA. Okay, Gemini, shout out to Ksenia Moore, Gemini 4th house. Usually means either living in a car, okay, or having two, like two mansions, two houses. If it's related, and by the way, one of the teachings that I had since childhood, that having each one having their home sustains the relationship better.